Welcome to the Wire to Wire podcast. As always, it's me, your host Yusuf. And I got a real interesting episode for you guys today. So without further ado, let's just get right to it. So BET is currently running a music docuseries discussing the history of Murder Inc. Now it's created by Irv Gotti, the founder of the music label Murder Inc. Now it's 4 episodes in so far, and I think they've done a pretty good job with it. I thought there were some pretty interesting stories in there. Some of them I already knew, and some of them are new to me. And it's a pretty good chronicling of them and their journey, and it definitely has a nostalgic aspect to it, especially with the way they incorporated the music and some of the stories that they're telling or revisiting. And I guess because I was a kid at the time, I didn't realize just how successful they were as a label, especially in regards to Ja Rule and Ashanti. Now, obviously, I knew that they were popular and they had hit songs, but I wasn't aware of the degree to their success. Now, as I was watching it, I found some pretty interesting themes that I thought would make for some interesting topics on today's episode. So, here are some takeaways or life lessons, if you will, that I think are pretty relevant and are interesting. So, I'm going to play a quick clip and then I'm going to break down my takeaway from it. Now, obviously, this is fair use. I'm only doing this for commentary and educational purposes. Now, you can watch the full docu-series on BET every Tuesday at 9 p.m. But before we get into all this, you guys be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. So here we go. Here's the first clip. And remember, this is fair use.
When we got married, I was like, he would never cheat on me. Like, I really believe that. Like, I was like, he would never break this vow. And he did. And he did. And
I basically told Deb, like, I'm not going to be faithful to you. And it was a moment of honesty that Deb appreciated. When I went home, my clothes, everything, she threw the shit out. And that's when I got kicked out the house.
So there's been huge discussions where we hear that successful men are going to cheat or they're going to exercise options, whatever your preferred phrase of choice is. Now, in this case, I'm not going to say that Irv Gotti is necessarily wrong per se for cheating. I'm not going to virtue signal or do that holier than thou stuff. The only mistake that I see that he made is that he clearly didn't set the boundary or the expectation with his ex-wife that this is what he's going to be doing. So the primary thing is you're going to have to let your main girl know if you're going to be seeing other girls. So that way you at least set the expectation and you left it up to them to decide whether or not it's something that they're willing to tolerate. Right? And from this clip, and as you're going to see in the docu-series if you decide to watch it, it's very obvious that he didn't do that. And that's why she got very emotional about it. And even in the docu-series, he tells a story about how she caught him and then she ended up hitting him. She got arrested, but he refused to press charges and then he later on went to bail her out of jail. But as you saw in the clip at the end, he came to the conclusion that he just won't be faithful to her. Now, had he communicated that from the beginning, there wouldn't be any issues. So that's the most important thing, is you have to communicate it early on, and then you leave it up to the girl to decide on whether or not it is something that she is willing to tolerate. If she is, then do your thing accordingly. If she isn't, then she can just leave you, and you as a man have to accept the fact that she is going to walk away because it's not something that she's willing to live with or tolerate. So it's only cheating if you're not being transparent about it. And that's where Irv messed up. And now, this is that takeaway, right? That successful men will exercise options. Well, the thing is with him, is that's what he was doing, but because he wasn't transparent about it in the beginning with her, It's not really exercising options in his case, it's actually cheating because there is a dishonest aspect to it. Had he communicated it clearly, then you could say that he was exercising options. So I think that's an important takeaway. Now, in this next clip that I'm going to play, he discusses his relationship with Ashanti. And there are also some other important takeaways that I would like to expound upon. So here it goes.
I was everywhere she was, and she was everywhere. I loved her. She's everything, and we're together.
Once Irv and Ashanti got into a relationship, she became his #1 priority.
And everybody else kind of like fell by the wayside.
Murder Inc. came at a standstill when he bounced over to R&B. None of us really made it, but Ashanti and Ja. Yeah.
So as you just saw, he was discussing him and Ashanti's relationship. Now here's some things that I took away when I watched that segment. So the first, you notice that he's discussing the relationship, his staff is discussing it, but Ashanti has never actually came out and confirmed or denied this relationship. Now for the record, I do believe Irv Gotti and what he's saying. Although I never knew that they had a relationship until recently when I watched him on Drink Champs, and then I learned more about it when watching this documentary. But still, it's been 20 years, or nearly 20 years, and he's still bringing it up. It's almost like he's harboring some kind of resentment or hurt from this relationship. And if you watch that Drink Champs interview that he did, Nori kind of alluded to it when Irv Gotti kept bringing it up. Now look, no matter what was done to us in previous relationships or what our experiences were in previous relationships, we have to let that hurt go. We can't let that anger or that bitterness stick with us and carry it with us for a long period of time. Now, the crazy thing about this is, when watching the docuseries, is that there's so much accomplishments and so much great things that are being discussed that a lot of it is going to get overshadowed by the fact that he had this relationship with her. And now the second thing, if you notice from that clip, is that they were all saying that she had become his main priority and he was losing focus. Now this isn't good for two reasons. So the first reason is that for a relationship to work, is there has to be some space. If you and your girl are always together and you're around each other 24/7, and it appears that that was the case with them, it can cause the relationship to go stale. Both people need to have their own lives. So imagine, she's seeing him in the studio, she's seeing him at video shoots, on tour, business meetings, and in the docuseries he also discusses that they had an apartment that they were living in together. So they're even seeing each other at home too. So when the hell do they ever have any time apart? And like I said earlier, that's how relationships can get stale and cause them to end quickly or prematurely. And if you watch that Drink Champs interview, he basically admitted to it, that essentially she ghosted him and he just randomly found out that she was with Nelly. Now when you're in that kind of a situation, it can be suffocating. And that's something that you want to try to avoid in relationships. And the other thing that I noticed too is that when they were discussing their relationship, the staff and the people around him, they were saying that he was starting to lose focus on the business and some of the other artists. And that's the second reason why this is not a good thing, because sometimes being in relationships, especially one like that, it can cause someone to lose track of their goals, their mission, or their focus, right? Just because you're with someone doesn't mean that you have to become complacent. So he started to drop everyone, and it appears like it was everything, and put his time, focus, and energy on his relationship with Ashanti and on her and her career. And this can become a problem on a professional level as well as relationally, like I was explaining earlier. So when you're with someone, You have to find a way to integrate them into your goals and your life while remaining focused and dedicated to what it is that you want to do. You can't just put those things on the back burner and make the girl your primary focus. It doesn't benefit you, and it can actually cause the girl to lose attraction for you over time. And no matter what a girl says, she doesn't want to be the center of your universe and be receiving 100% of your attention. You gotta have that balance. And this actually kind of ties into another takeaway that I got from this particular segment, and it just reaffirms something that I've already believed to be true, which is that you don't mix business and pleasure together. Now, I personally don't believe in getting relationships with colleagues, business partners, or things of that nature. It can complicate things. It can make things uncomfortable, and it could potentially create a contentious environment. And it's not just for you two, but even for those around you. Now, I know it's common and people do it because of the proximity as well as the familiarity with each other, but I personally don't believe that it's the right decision to make. Now, not everyone is going to work out like Jim and Pam. And shout out to the Office fans, you know what I'm talking about. And to be honest, rather than having that kind of an ending, you'll probably more so end up like Irv Gotti and Ashanti. Now, when things go bad, there can lead to potentially not speaking, and that can make things difficult not just for both of you, but for the people around you, and it can have negative consequences. So just the fact that there is a possibility that something can go wrong is enough for me to say that it's just not worth it. But there's actually another clip that I want to get into, so I'm going to run it and then I'll share my takeaway.
I should have let 50 Cent sign with Sony or Atlantic. I'm cool with Tommy Mottola, but instead I was like, if you sign him, you ain't me. I'll tell you that for sure. So I blocked it to the point where he fell in Eminem's lap. I can't call Eminem and block it. Eminem is with Dr. Dre. I can't call Dr. Dre and block it.
So we know about the beef between 50 Cent and Murder Inc. that took place. If for some reason you don't, there's a channel on YouTube called Diverse Mentality, I believe, and they have a pretty good two-part series discussing the entire history, and it's very detailed. It's pretty interesting. You can check it out if you're into that kind of stuff. But anyways, here are a few takeaways from it that I think that are somewhat connected. So the first thing is, when you intentionally wrong someone or your intention is to hurt someone, you're really only wronging or hurting yourself. And like you just saw there, Irv Gotti blocked damn near every major label from signing 50 Cent. And in the end, he ended up signing with Eminem and Dr. Dre. And then the rest was history. And we know what 50 Cent went on to become. And Irv Gotti and his label went downhill from there. Now, I think I said this on a previous episode that I did, but 50 Cent basically put them out of business like it was a pandemic. And he ruined them musically with diss tracks and music skits and just flat out embarrassed them. He turned them into being something uncool, and he's really what caused their decline. Now imagine, the very artist that you tried to block ends up being the artist that takes down your entire business. Now that's the kind of thing that you see in a movie where the main character ends up getting their revenge at the end. Now on top of this happening, there was also a bunch of legal issues that Murder Inc. was having with the federal government, where they were being investigated for money laundering. They were experiencing financial issues because the feds had froze their accounts, and they stopped the major labels, Def Jam and Universal, I believe, from doing any form of business with them, and said that if they were to do business with them, they would also be charged and indicted as well. So musically, they experienced a decline, right? Ashanti ended up leaving the label because she didn't want to be part of this at all. And things were just going downhill for them as it's outlined in the docuseries. So the moral of this whole point, the moral of this whole story, right, of what I'm trying to say is don't wrong people because it'll always come back to you.
We didn't want to feed into the new artist shitting on us to give him more energy.
I didn't feel like that's how we should handle it because at that point, 50 was blowing up in the street. That was our social media back then.
As 50's rising and going against them off some personal beef he has with them, there's also audience backlash that's already going on. People are getting tired of this same sound being the dominant sound. That's how the culture is. I mean, we see that today. Like, you got guys that people ride the wave of their thing and then we turn on them. We want that new thing. What's that new thing? What's that new sound?
Everybody loved Murder Inc. until 50 came around and said, you're not supposed to love Ja anymore. It's all about me now. And he was right.
You could be one day on top of the world and wake up with the world on top of you.
And another thing to take away from this, on a highly positive note, is that when it's your time, it is your time. And there is nothing or no one that could stop it. So Irv Gotti tried to block 50 Cent at every turn, right? But in the end, he just couldn't. The Most High had bigger plans for 50. And of course, 50 Cent himself put in the work to be in a position to accomplish those goals. But I believe that it was God's grace and his blessings that elevated him to the highest of levels. And this goes to show that no matter who or what is against you, when something is meant for you, there is nothing or no one that can stop it from happening. And the last thing in there that's, I think, a pretty good nugget of wisdom, and you heard Ja Rule allude to this at the end of the clip, is that one day you're on top, and one day the world is on top of you. And I believe that to be true, and I just believe that's a natural cycle of life. And this is a truth that we must accept in all aspects of life. You know, we have moments in life where we're all the way at the top like this, and then somehow we find ourselves at the bottom, right? But the key thing is, how are we conducting ourselves in those moments? Are we arrogant when we're on top, or are we humble? Are we burning bridges, or are we making connections? The person that we don't think we need today may be someone of importance tomorrow. And this is an ongoing cycle, right? So to kind of use the same principle, I want to tie it into a famous quote, actually, and it goes a little something like, once a man, twice a child. So one of the interesting things about life, if we're fortunate enough to live long lives, is that we often go out the same way that we came in. So think about it like this. When we were babies and we were infants, we were bald or we had thin hair, we couldn't use our limbs that well, right? Like our hands, our arms, and legs. We lacked strength and we relied on others for help. And our brain function isn't fully there because our brains obviously haven't fully developed. Now think about it. When we're really old, right, I'm talking elderly, we're basically the same way. You know, and for most of us, our life started in hospitals. And for many of us, our life will end in the same place, right? So this is the cycle of life. One day we're on top, one day we're not. But even look at it from a business standpoint, because like I said earlier, it can apply to all facets of life. The companies that were dominating the business world 10 or even 20 years ago, they're not anymore. Look at where Apple was 20 years ago compared to where they are today. So in life, things are always changing. So we have to accept this reality, right? But it's how we conduct ourselves when we're at the top and how we conduct ourselves when we're at the bottom, right, on that journey. That's what's going to reveal true character. And that's what truly matters. But these are just some important takeaways and reminders that I got from the docuseries. Of course, it applies to me. And if you see any value in this, then, you know, you can also take it away and think about it and how it shapes your life as well. But that's all I got for today. Be sure to like, share the video, and also be sure to subscribe to the channel. And you can also follow me on Instagram. Until next time, take care.